Hello and welcome to yet another Blender Absolute Beginner tutorial. Today we're going to pick up where we left off with the previous video with the house we were working on. Today's video is going to be a little bit tedious, especially at the beginning, but I'm going to leave you with something that should be pretty entertaining and let you play around with a lot of stuff yourself. With that said, let's jump right into it. The first thing we're going to do is the tedious stuff, and that involves setting up some better lighting. So I was looking at this, and remember you can press, oh, I forgot the screencast keys. You can press F12, and that'll get you your quick render. And if you notice, the shadows are nice. You can see the front illuminated, but the back's very dark. What we want is a much broader, softer lighting for this. So what I'm going to do is take this plane that we turned into a light source, right? If you recall, we put a material on there that's called emission, and what that does is it makes this plane emit light, and thus it becomes our light source for the whole scene. It's the only thing in this whole scene giving off light. If we took this out, everything would be pitch black. So what we want to do is get some more broad lighting. What we're going to do is right click on this plane. We're going to scale it with S, and I'm going to scale it to about 5 times its height, or height and width is what it scales. Hit enter to lock that in, and then I need to grab it, put it on the Z axis, and raise it up quite a bit. Let's say I want to raise it maybe 5. So I press 5, hit enter. Then what I want to do is hold down, this is a new key combination, see if I get it right. With this light source selected, I want to hit shift, hold down shift, and press D. And what that does is duplicates the object I have selected. You can see I have a duplicate now. Kind of like the extrude that we learned, but it's in no way attached. It's its own completely different object now. I'm going to grab it, and I'm going to move it along the x-axis, let's say 5. Where does that put it? 5. I want to go -5, I think. Wait. I gotta find this first. Oh, that's why, because I'm looking at the wrong axis. I want to put this on the x-axis, about 5. I want to rotate it 180 degrees. Looks like it got turned a little bit. I'm going to rotate it another 90 degrees. It's just kind of just finagling with it until you get it right. Ooh. Alright, anyway, that'll give us some soft lighting back there. I'm just going to move it around toward the back. So now if we check out our scene, much brighter, very bright actually. We might even want to turn down the brightness. And the way we do that is click on this and just turn down the strength. I'll turn mine down to 7. It's really not important. We can adjust this later. Lighting's usually one of the last things that you get just right. So now we're going to jump into the really tedious stuff. We are going to rename all of our objects. We have been doing a terrible job. We have several objects now, I think, 4? And none of them are named anything except for plane or cube. You can see what everything's named up in this little outline window up in the top right where I'm circling my mouse. And if you actually pull this down a little, you can see all 4 of our objects here. The cube is what we made into the house. So I'm going to click on that, and you can either double click here to rename it. I'm going to name it house. Or, for example, on this plane, this is the ground plane, as you can see is highlighted since I clicked on it. You can come to your properties and you can click on the square. This is the object properties, and you can just change the name here. I'm going to call this one ground, and see it updates it up here. Now the other 2 planes are the light sources. So I'm going to name one light 1. I'm going to name the other one light 2. So original, I know. So with that done, now we're going to start breaking apart our house. Let me explain to you first of all why I want to break apart the house. I'm going to separate the roof, the sides and walls, the windows, and the door into all separate objects. The reason I want to do this is it makes it a little bit simpler to show you the materials. when I apply materials to them. You can apply multiple materials to one single object, different parts of it having different materials, but for simplicity's sake, I'm going to apply one material to one object. So I'm going to start separating this out. I'm going to select the house, then go into edit mode. You can see I actually already have one window selected. If you want to deselect everything, we'll start with the roof. I think it'll be easiest. So I want to come to a vertical view and make it really easy to select the entire roof. I'm going to just do box select with B and click and drag to select everything up there. Now you can come down and verify. Only thing that should be selected is the roof. Perfect. Now with that selected, to break it out into a new object, you can press the P key and its separate menu. I want to separate selection. There we go. Now I have a new object up here called house.001. I'm going to name this roof. And if with that selected, it put me back in object mode. I'm going to go into edit mode and just verify. You can see it's its own object now. It won't let me edit the rest of the house. If I go over to object mode, select the house, go back to edit mode, the roof is now separate. Wonderful. Now I'm going to do the same with the front door. Now the front door is 6 squares the way I made mine, so I'm just going to circle, select with C, click and drag to select those. Then I'm going to hit P and separate selection. And I'm going to name this door. Okay, now I have 3 windows. Make sure you select the object you want, tab in, select with C, and then P to separate selection. Okay. Now that one is going to be named window 1. Right click on the object, tab into edit mode, C for circle select, select the part I want, hit P. I hit escape there first to get out of the selection mode. Hit P to separate selection. I'll name this window 2. Again, right click on the house, tab, circle select, get the window, hit escape to get out of the selection mode, P, and separate selection. And then I have window 3. Alright, so I've got all my pieces now. The next thing I want to do is start applying some materials. And I'll start with the simplest. The simplest is going to be the plane that everything sits on. I'm going to make mine actually a little bit bigger. I'm going to scale by 2. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over and I'm going to introduce something very complex, but also a lot simpler than it used to be. Make sure you're on Cycles Blender, or Cycles Render over here. I know I've introduced the Blender render engine. From now on, I'm pretty much exclusively going to use Cycles Render, and unless I say otherwise. Cycles Render will give you different options on the right hand side, so it's important to double check that. I'm going to come over to the small circle with the 4 quadrants, and I'm going to click on it. This is the Materials tab. It's important to have distinct in your mind what is meant by material versus what is meant by texture, the next tab over. A material is the innate color of the object, and, well, I can sum that up even simpler. A material is how the object interacts with light. That involves color, that involves glossiness, how much it reflects. And there's 2 words that are often thrown around, and those are specular and diffuse. And I want to show you an example of these different types of materials so that you have a good grasp. But the first thing we're going to do, make sure your object is selected, and that's the plane that everything's sitting on. Go over to your Materials tab, not the textures. We'll get into textures in a different video. Materials tab, click New. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to introduce the node editor. You can configure your windows however you want. Personally, I don't use the timeline very much, so I'm going to pull this up. I'm going to turn this window, remember the header, on the far left side you can turn any window into any other window. I'm going to turn this, for example, into a 3D view window, and I can have the same 3D view window. But actually I'm going to end up going with node editor. Node editor, it's something new, I know. I'm going to try and take this slow. Node editor has similar controls to the 3D view window. You can click with the middle mouse button to move around. It's only two-dimensional though. You can zoom in with the middle mouse button. You can right click to move things. You can also left click to move things and select things. Now, the node editor you will see very, very often for materials. It's important to get materials how they should be, and it's pretty much only used in the cycles render engine, but it is extremely powerful. So what you'll see here are two nodes, and they're connected by a strand. This final node here is the output. It says on top, I'll try and scroll in because I know this is going to be on a smaller video. It says on the very top there, material output. This is how the material for the currently selected object, which is the bottom here, this is how it is going to be output. Now, at the risk of breaking my machine, I'm going to change my viewport shading to rendered. And what this is going to do is show a preview of how it will be rendered in the 3D view window. So, this is what it's going to look like. You'll notice I have my material output. This is just the material of the plane that everything's sitting on. The color, feeding into the surface. The surface is what you'll use for most of the... Okay, so there's three things: surface, volume, displacement. I've never really used volume. It's for special things. Surface is how the surface will look. Displacement is used for making, it's kind of a way of faking roughness on a material. We'll learn about that later. That has to do with bump maps, if you've ever heard of a bump map. But yeah, we'll learn about that much later. For now, we only need to worry about the surface. We're going to change the surface of the material by connecting a node, and this is called a shader. Anything that ends with this BSDF, that stands for a mathematical algorithm for how the light will affect the thing. We call it a shader for short. Shaders are it's how you change how the light interacts with the object. So for example, we would call this a diffuse shader. Diffuse means the light is diffused after hitting the object. It's like a white sheet of paper versus a silver piece of, say, aluminum foil. They both reflect all the light, right? But the paper reflects diffuse light. It's not glossy at all. It shoots it off in every direction, and so it doesn't appear shiny. That's diffuse. If you want to look at some others, you can actually come over to the surface over on the properties over here and click, and these are all different shaders you can apply. You can see some called glossy, one called glass, one called diffuse, there's a velvet, transparent, translucent. There's all kinds of different shaders for how you want the light to interact. And feel free to try these out. You can click on any of these. Let's say we want, I don't know, where's glossy? You'll notice now that there's a reflection of the house and the light source because it's very shiny and glossy. The house is reflected in that plane, and the light source back there in the distance is reflected in that plane. In fact, we can move this around and you can see how glossy and shiny it is. I don't want that. I want this to look kind of like grass. So what I'm going to do is, I'll give velvet a shot. You know, that's got some texture to it. I'm going to make this, instead of white, I want to take this and make it green. Remember, everything looks a little bit yellowish in here because I added some yellowishness to the light source. So it's kind of a yellowish light. So you saw it change that to green, and it changed and updated automatically. Yeah, automatically in the viewport, in the 3D view window. This is, if, for example, if I turned off this shader by disconnecting it from the material output node, you can do that by holding down Control and dragging a line. You can see it turns into a knife to cut. You can see it no longer has any information about how to reflect the light. But if we click on this green, and these actually are color coded for what kind of information they're passing. So when you connect dots on these nodes, you typically want the same colors to the same colors. There are exceptions, but typically green goes to green. So we're going to go velvet shader to the surface of the material. Once we connect that again, you can see, there we go, we've got green surface. Now, we've actually already done something similar with the light sources. If I were to, I'm still in object mode up here in the 3D view window, if I were to right click on one of the lights that I have, the light planes, you can see I actually already have the node set up for an emission shader here. It's just like choosing what kind of shader I want on this side. And by shader I mean the mathematical formula for how light interacts with the thing. And this emission one makes light come out of the thing, and it's connected to surface. This material output node you'll see in every single material node. This is the final collector of all the information. No matter how complex the network of nodes, you always have this material output at the end, because that's how you connect it to the object. Alright, that said, I think I've spent enough time going pretty slow on these. I know that's a lot to grasp. I recommend you play around with it and just give it a shot. I would recommend taking a couple of these objects and just trying out all kinds of different shaders. You can see velvet versus transparent, so light's going through it. You can see glass. Glass, you may get some weird artifacts. This is usually just the light being reflected oddly. Not a big deal. We'll go to, let's see, I'll try diffuse. Diffuse is good for things that are just flat matte colors. They're not glossy at all. So I'm going to leave it on diffuse. I'm going to actually turn my color a little bit darker. Okay, now I'm going to go through and I'm going to put these material shaders on each object in my house. And that's one of the reasons that I separated out the objects, is so we could keep track of them very easily. So I'm going to pull this down. This is going to let me select my objects a little faster. I'm going to start with the roof. And the roof, on the material tab, it does have a material already on it. I'm going to click use nodes to allow me to use nodes for the surface. The default node is the diffuse shader connected to the material output, which is good for me. I think that would work just fine. I'm going to turn this brown by going a little bit orange and then darkening the whole thing. I think this is on here because I was playing with the entire house having a color. So I'm actually going to delete this one. And I'm going to go through to my door and my house, and this little X here unlinks the material. So I'm going to go to my windows and I'm going to delete that just so we can unlink what I was playing with before this video and forgot that I had saved. So I'm going to go back and catch up with you by going to the roof, selecting the roof, and I'm going to, remember I can actually switch back to solid mode and select the roof manually if I need to. Since I'm in this rendered mode, or this rendered view, I'm going to select it using this outline of all the objects here. So roof, new material. The diffuse is the default. I'm going to go a little orange, darken it to get a brown. I think that's good enough. And then once I'm done, I can just leave it as is. Then I'm going to go to the house, add new, default is diffuse. Let's see, what color do I want my house? I think I want to make my house a nice sky blue, just because it's different. Alright, there's my diffuse house. Okay, now I'm going to go to the door, add new under material, and diffuse is the default. You can see in the node editor here. Same thing we saw before, very simple. I'm going to make my door a nice dark blue just to stand out. It's the ugliest house in the world. And then the next are the windows. Now with the windows, I wanted to try something like using, looks like it's already got a material attached to it, so I might have missed one. I'm going to close whatever material was on that window, or unlink it with that X. Then I'm going to hit new. I'm going to change the shader to glass. Let's see if I can find which window. This was window 1. So it's actually going to be this window. So I've changed it to glass. The Beckman pull down here on your node is essentially some settings in the algorithm that it uses. I don't know much about the difference between these three, so I would leave it at the default. Roughness is what it sounds like. It's the roughness of the glass. I'm going to make mine non-zero just so it has some like texture to it, I guess. IOR stands for index of refraction. It's a property of transparent materials. It's how light bends through the material. So if you've ever seen a straw in a glass of water and it looks like it's curved or it looks like it's cut and offset a little bit, that's because the light is offset by the index of refraction. So index of refraction is good if you're dealing with multiple glass objects or multiple transparent objects so that they don't look uniform. It's helping them look like a glass filled with water. They're both transparent, but you can tell the difference from how the light bounces between them. For our case, we don't really need to worry about that. I'm going to go, this is all good default then. I'm not going to have tinted windows. I'm going to leave it at white, and it still goes to the same surface material output. I'm going to go to my next window, new material, and I'm going to make it glass. Same way, same thing, tiny bit of roughness, why not? And then I'm going to go to the third window, new shader, or new material, with the shader being glass. Default, great, roughness, tiny bit. Alright, now, if you look, I have two glass windows on both ends, and I can actually see through them on my house. There are materials there, but they are transparent. They're glass. So here's what, after the tediousness of renaming, separating out everything, here's what I'm going to leave you with. I want you to take your house, I want you to take the plane that it sits on, and I want you to add a material to everything. Separate out each part that you think you want to add a different material to using that P key in edit mode. And then I want you to go through, make sure you know your list of material, your list of objects rather, and go into your properties, go to material for each one, add your material, and then choose under surface, choose the shader. We actually didn't need to use the nodes. We could have handled everything over here on the right side. However, as it gets more complex, we can do special things. And let me show you an example. I'm going to show you an example of a more complex node setup. And this is just the next step up. So instead of having one shader going into surface, I'm going to go to the roof, and I'm going to say, well, I want parts of my roof to be a little bit glossy, but I want parts of the roof to be diffuse too. So I'm going to cut this. Remember, hold down Control, left mouse, drag across to cut. I'm going to hit Shift A to add a node, and this is with the mouse in the node editor. I'm going to find the, where is it? Shader, and I want to add a glossy shader, and I'm going to just drag that down here, and I'm going to hit Shift A, and I'm going to add another node. This one's going to be, oh, I knew where this one was, but I have to look for it now. I'm sorry guys, I know this is painful. There is a node here. As you can see, there's a lot of nodes. There's a node here that allows you to combine shaders. Here it is, under shader, the very top, it's called mix shader. So click on that, and where did it go? Shift A, shader, mix shader. There it is, it's on my mouse. Okay, click it down in place. Now we're going to connect the diffuse shader to one of the slots. We're going to connect the glossy shader to one of the slots. And we're going to connect the output of the shader to the surface. Now we have a glossy white mixed with a diffuse or matte brown color. And this is kind of the output we get. There's one setting on the mix shader, and that's the factor at which to combine them. Now 0 goes all the top one, 1.0 goes all the bottom one. So if I wanted probably about 0.25, we'll say, somewhere in there, to do about 3/4 brown diffuse and about 1/4 of glossy, and I'm actually going to make this a brown glossy as well. And as you can see, that adds a little bit of extra complexity to that roof. Sorry, I keep moving it around and making it re-render, but you'll see that it does shine a little bit because of how the light hits it on this edge, and that's because it has some glossiness to it now. So what I want you to do is I want you to play with that. On your house, I want you to, you don't have to use the mix shader. You can use one shader per material if you want, but I want you to make everything colorful, make it how you want it. And with that done, I am going to end this video here. If you have any questions, I know some of this was moving a little fast. If you have any questions, please post them below the video. Save this if you want. I think I'm going to move on to something new as far as models go for next week, but save this if you want and keep track of it. Actually, I'm going to save mine right now so I don't forget. And yeah, like I said, if you have questions, post them. Otherwise, we'll see you next week. Thanks.